Listen to the story of your lifters. Listen to the story of people in front of you. I've walked into gyms and I've listened to individual coaches because we've been doing this for a few decades now. And sometimes I listen to them and I say, listen, this person might be old, but you don't know the experience that person brings to the gym.
Hi, Francois. It's my pleasure to have you on Evidence Strong Show. If you could briefly introduce yourself.
Pleased to meet you, Alex. My name is François Gravelle. I'm a full professor at the School of Human Kinetics at the University of Ottawa in Canada. I've been involved with weightlifting style lifting for, oh my God, close to 50 years now, since 1977. As an athlete at first, then a coach developer, and also an international judge in weightlifting. So I was also part of a group that rewrote and redesigned our coaching certification program for weightlifting. In a nutshell, that's a little bit my background.
Wow. And you also do research in weightlifting. I invited you because of the particular paper, which is titled I'm Not Too Old to Lift, Exploring Lifelong Involvement in Olympic Weightlifting Through the Serious Leisure Perspective. So why this study? Tell me how it came to be.
Well, many years ago, when I did my doctoral thesis, I was looking at active participation of healthy seniors within a community environment in physical activity. And it dawned on me back then that most of the research that I was reading, and still a bit today, it's getting better, but at that time, most of the research was focusing on attendance in programs. And that caught my attention. And then later on, I kept on reading, of course, on the topic, and I realized that many of the research were focusing their attention on the ones who will start participating and within a month or so, or 10 weeks or whatever, will leave the activity, never to come back to the activity, which is not a bad thing in itself because nothing stops us from trying different things. But I thought that most of the benefits from taking part in an activity like a physical activity will come in with time and involvement. And then we started thinking, my colleagues and I were thinking, what if instead of looking at the ones who decide to move away, what about the ones who decide to stay connected to the activity for many decades? And you'll see when we talk a bit about the methodology, it's interesting to see how long people will stay connected to an activity, and eventually this activity leans itself to a community and so on and so forth. So in my mind, we were looking from a longevity perspective, we were looking for success stories. And this is essentially, that was the starting point of our research. And we realized that, like anybody else, individuals who maintain their participation in an activity like weightlifting, we also looked at martial arts and other form of activities, do have the same constraint, the same professional challenges, the same family constraint as anybody else, but somehow they found a strategy or strategies to stay active within their chosen activity. So that's, in a nutshell, that's how we got going in connection with this research.
All right, so let's go into the weeds and please tell us how you designed the study. Who did you invite and how did you go about data collection?
We handpicked individuals who we knew had been involved in the field of weightlifting for many years. And I was lucky enough to be able to know a lot of them because I have been involved for many years. And also, as an international official, I travel a lot. So I get to meet people who have been involved in weightlifting either as an athlete, a coach, or an official for many years. And this is how we managed to gather those 22 participants. So basically, the way we went about, it was fully volunteered. We interviewed each participant, and having the concept of serious leisure, or the theory of serious leisure as a backdrop, we wanted to know essentially what was their life story in weightlifting and how it impacted them as a person, and in many cases, in their family life and their professional life.
So now we are at the themes. You had 5 main themes. Do you want to go through each one of them and explain them a little bit so we have some kind of understanding how these people, these special individuals are thinking, or how Olympic weightlifting panned out in their life?
Hold on, I don't have the themes here in front of me.
I can start the themes.
Go with the themes and I'll put the explanation.
Okay, so the first theme was lifelong passion and commitment to Olympic weightlifting, and it has 2 sub-themes: development of serious leisure career and perseverance. So let's dig in.
Let's dig in. One interesting element of serious leisure perspective is that it looks at leisure participation as a career. And it's interesting that there's a connection made between what we tend to look at as being a professional career and a leisure career. And what Stebbins suggested is that, well, serious leisure participant will plan the evolution of their participation. And this evolution will be based on, of course, their interest. They will be based on their connection with the activity, on time. I've had participants who had been involved in weightlifting for 40 years, but never really competed, as others had been to the Olympics, came back, kept competing, or had been to the Olympics, came back and maintained their involvement in a different fashion. But there's a sense of organization. And it would be, for example, you would start in the community as a novice, and then you would go as a junior athlete, and then eventually you become a senior athlete, and then you move up the stages to eventually reach your optimal potential, or where you want to go with your athletic career. And it's the same thing with other type of involvement. If, for example, you would like to become an international judge, well, it takes about 5 to 8 years to get yourself to that level. So there's that sense of planning. It's not something that happens by mistake, for example. And of course, related to this theme, and it is a very central sub-theme to this major theme, the element of perseverance. And if this is an element that came over and over and over again, individuals will say, well, at first I couldn't do it, but I kept trying, I kept trying, I kept trying. Eventually I got it. And this concept of perseverance, I look at it as being one of the key concepts of a serious leisure involvement. So not to go too deep into it, that's how I would look at this first theme.
Theme number 2.
Theme number 2.
Rigorous training regimens across life.
Weightlifting requires a rigorous training regimen. Now let me, how can I say, qualify this. There's a lot of misconception regarding theories of coaching, theories of training. And I'm sure your audience knows about it. Rigorous lifelong training means that we need to adjust the training if you're a young athlete and you're on your progression up. Of course, we'll talk about periodization. Nothing in competition should be performed without being planned before. Every lift you take, you've decided at the beginning of the season, normally. So there's no surprises. There's no Hail Mary. An anecdote. In one of the Olympics, I believe it was in 2016. I'm awful with names. We had an amazing performance of a super heavyweight. I believe he was from the German team.
Matthias Steiner.
Steiner, exactly. I had his picture in my mind, but where he took a 10-kilo jump. And that's what I call a Hail Mary, to win a gold medal. Well, for about 4 years after, we had to teach our new coaches not to do this with new athletes. Steiner had been training for years and he was emotionally involved in that lift and so on and so forth. But when you have a young athlete, don't do that. Go on success. And this is part of the lifelong training. There's a curve to follow. If you're an elite athlete, of course, you'll follow periodization. If you're a starting athlete, well, you have to follow what we call the long-term athlete development. You need to learn to move properly. You need to learn to train properly. You need to learn to compete. You need to learn to train to win and whatnot. And as older athletes, you need to be humble. Adjust your training not to what your mind is telling you, but what your body is allowing you to do. And this is humbling. And it is part of the lifelong, structured, organized training. Nobody trains heavy all the time. We build it up. And this is why after an Olympic, often we'll look at the champions of the previous Olympics and say, well, what's going on? They're way below what they did 6 months or 9 months or a year ago at the Olympics. Now they're at the World Championship and they end up in 10th position, for example. It's normal because we go down to rebuild and readjust to peak again. So training is for life. And to succeed in weightlifting, you need to have a structured training program.
Okay, next one is injury experiences and recovery strategies.
Oh my God, that was one of the elements that kept coming back. Weightlifting is one of the sports compared to other sports, such as contact sports, where the level of injuries is lower than many other sports. Why? Because it's a controlled, they call that controlled motion. But you do have injuries. Sometimes it could be an injury such as a tendonitis. It could be lately, I remember being at some world championships and there were some injuries to the elbows, some injuries to shoulders, and so on. So it is part of the sport. And every time you push the body to a further to its limit, well, you're bound to have more chances of injuries. So, of course, I believe everyone I talked to had at one point in their career to deal with some sort of an injury. What's interesting is that almost all athletes stated that whenever they had injuries, they looked at it as being a challenge, not a game ender. And as much as weightlifting is an individual sport, these athletes would seek help from professionals in order to deal with their injury and eventually take it upon themselves to deal with the injury so they could come back stronger and better at the platform, at the competition, or where they were in the club that they were part of. So essentially, what I found is that they will do whatever is needed to get over those injuries, which connects with the element of maintenance of participation, resilience in the sport.
All right, next theme is self-improvement and personal growth.
It's a theme that, of course, again, it's as if I'm repeating myself, but it kept coming back. Weightlifting is, of course, an individual group activity. I'll put it this way. We live beside other lifters, but essentially, we have to get within ourselves to be able to perform the lift. From that perspective, when you challenge yourself in performing a lift, you need to recruit all the energy and the ability that you have in order to harness that energy and focus it on the movement on hand. And I feel it is one of strategy that weightlifters will use for personal growth. If, for example, you're impatient, you learn to be patient. If, for example, you have a short fuse, you learn to extend the fuse a little bit. If, for example, you're anxious, well, you learn to control that anxiety and so on and so forth. So, of course, weightlifting is a really good tool to foster personal growth. And the other one was we had personal growth and
Self-improvement.
self-improvement. Well, weightlifting doesn't lie. Either you perform the lift or you don't. And it's always a battle against our buddy Newton, who decided to invent gravity. So sometimes you win, sometimes Newton wins. So, of course, it's all part of that.
Theme number 5, social and community building.
Not important. Let's skip it. Social and community community building.
And there are two sub-themes, so let's bring them. Community and camaraderie, and coaching and mentorship for athlete development and legacy.
Oh my God, wait. Oh,
Huge.
it's a huge. My God, we were so creative on that last one. Weightlifting, I'll start with this. One of the great thing about Olympic weightlifting is that it is a community. I've done work with we call that the regular circuit, individuals who are still moving up, young athletes, whether it's junior or senior level, world championships and so on. And you could feel the sense of community. And there is a concept called community of practice that I also use. We didn't use it in this article, but I use it a lot in my research, where a group of persons will meet around a common objective, a common goal, a common passion. So weightlifting becomes that magnet that brings people together. Even at the international level, you would go into a warm-up room at a world championship and everybody is talking the same language. There's an immense amount of respect that I always found within those rooms between teams. There is competitiveness, we agree with that, but there is that element of respect. For example, if somebody performs a lift, you don't walk in front of the platform, and so on and so forth, for security and also purposes and for respect. So that concept of community is drilled into us from day one. You're part of a club, you're part of a sport, you're part of something bigger. And moving on, because most of the athletes that we've interviewed were they were all between the ages of 50 and 99, actually. No, 50 and 89. He was turning 90 that year. The concept of camaraderie was very, very important because those are individuals who evolved together for years, decades. So they know each other. And then we go for dinner after the competition and then the stories comes out. And you could see that there is that connection that still exists. A large proportion of my friends today come from the time that we were competing in weightlifting. And we still go a couple times a month for breakfast together and we chat about our career and everything. But of course, we talk about weightlifting because we created that bond. I find that bond is even stronger with master athletes, where everybody knows how fragile a competitor could be, in the sense that they could be the best competitor for that lift, and then they're an injury away from never competing again, especially if you're closing on to 90 years old. But that element of camaraderie that bond is very, very strong. And athletes will support each other, they will encourage each other. Of course, when you deal with international competitions and so on, well, it's another ball game. But for this particular research, we were looking mostly at master athletes who have been around the block. They had been to world championship and they had been competing at different level, and then they find each other and they have that bond that was created from their connection with weightlifting. Now, the coaching and mentorship, that came out very strongly. Even for those athletes, those master athletes who were still quite involved in a competitive perspective of weightlifting. People like to share. People like to help. And it's sort of connected with this element of community. One of the questions I was asking is, if you would sell weightlifting to a newcomer, how would you sell it? And it's interesting to see what people would come up with, the strategies they would come up with. And you could see that sense of mentorship, that desire to help and get people to discover what became a passion in their life. And of course, legacy is important because every one of the participants that we interviewed would like weightlifting to continue. And master athletes are fantastic, but we also need young people into the sport. So getting involved in some sort of mentorship, and mentorship could be to coach an athlete. I've seen mentorship in coaching. I've seen mentorship in when you have a new official. So we will sit down and chat and see, well, this is what happens when this happens, this is how we deal, and so on and so forth. So the concept of mentorship is pretty well everywhere within the weightlifting culture.
Would you say that support of athletes who are more experienced provided to athletes who are just starting competing, for example, would that be part of it?
Definitely. When I started lifting, I was fortunate in my city. We had only one weightlifting club, out of which came at least 10 national team members and 6 Olympians. So I wasn't at that level. I didn't have the talent to be at that level. But I remember chatting with the ones who were at the level of going to the next Olympics and chatting with them. And essentially, they became friends. And they helped me tremendously as an athlete and also as a person, because their take on challenges is quite different than what you would find in other spheres of in other subcultures, for example.
All right. So my question would be, why do you think, if you would bring it all together, why these people decided to stay in Olympic weightlifting for so long?
It's easy. We got bit by the steel bug. I think weightlifting attracts individuals that have certain personality traits. And I know I'm on very, very slippery ground here. Any psychologist will say, oh, there you go. But what you need to have specific makeup to spend hours in a basement, because you can't do this on a second floor. You'll destroy the building. In a basement, lifting heavy weights in a very noisy room, because we drop the weights with even with bumper plates. It's crazy how noisy it is, and still come back to it after injuries, after you keep on missing, and so on and so forth. I think for those individuals, and I'm part of them, those individuals, weightlifting brings in a renewed challenge every day. And I think this is what we kind of strive over. We strive over this new challenge, because every day there's an old saying, you never walk in the same river twice, and you never meet the same person twice, because we evolve every day. Well, I think it's the same thing for a weightlifter. And sometimes, in my case, we do evolve this way, but we won't go there.
Well, then you have to compensate with your mental strength, and so
There you go. There you go.
that's what I'm saying to myself every hard session.
It's the same here. I'm with you on this.
All right, so let's bring it all together. If you would have to build a message for weightlifting coaches from your study, what would that be?
Listen to the story of your lifters. Listen to the story of people in front of you. I've walked into gyms and I've listened to individual coaches, because we've been doing this for a few decades now. And sometimes I listen to them and I say, listen, this person might be old, but you don't know the experience that person brings to the gym. I would say also be very honest with your athletes. Maybe at the age of 70, you will not snatch 100 kilos. Maybe you won't do that, but you can still perform a really good lift at a weight that will not hurt you. And I would say tailor the program to the athletes, as opposed to having a ready-made cookie cutter type of program. And I would say be aware of Coach YouTube and Coach Google, because they don't all have the answers.
All right. I always finish with two short questions. The first one is, what is your favorite lift? Which one and why?
The snatch, because it's very, very technical, very fast. And when you miss, you miss. And it's humbling, because either it goes back or goes forward. And I tell my students, you think life is hard. Whenever I was lifting, if I would make a mistake, I'd have 3 red lights flashing behind me and an announcer saying, Gravelle missed the lift. Is he going to do it again? But when you get it and you're in a bottom position and you're in balance, it's a phenomenal feeling. And when you can come up and control the weight, it's better than dark chocolate, I'm telling you.
All right. And the last question is where people can find you online if they want to follow your work or ask a question.
I'm on the site of the University of Ottawa. Look into School of Human Kinetics, and I'm part of the faculty. My name is François Gravelle.
Awesome, Francois. Thank you so much for today. It was a pleasure.
You're more than welcome. Any other questions, feel free to get in touch with me.